On today's show, I'm going to be telling you why the investigation being prolonged actually might help Keaton Wagler. Going to be talking about that and more on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. My name is Darian Vaziri, also known as Dime Dropper, and today we're going to be talking about why I believe that the aspiration investigation being on hold actually might help Keaton Wagler, what the potential fallouts would be if the trade does not go through, and then looking at our pecking order of bigs coming off the bench given Yanic's injury and whatnot. But let's begin by talking about why I believe that Keaton Wagler might actually benefit from this investigation being prolonged. So let's say that, the findings come out, or let's just first example, what if the findings don't come out for a while? The Clippers, it's not a good thing for the Clippers. Let me just make it very clear. Being good for Keaton Wagler does not mean it's necessarily good for the Clippers. We need to get this deal sorted out so we can have financial clarity and see what we need to do to bring Ben Mathurin back and just kind of finalize this roster for the upcoming season. With the trade being on hold, it puts all of that in jeopardy and just kind of doesn't allow us to move forward. It puts us at a standstill. And not just us, the Toronto Raptors as well. But the reason why I say that this is good for Keaton Wagler is the more that is on hold, the more that the possibility starts to creep into the minds of the coaching staff of the Clippers that, maybe Kawhi nor Brandon Ingram will be ready to play to start the season. That only makes Keaton Wagler's role increase. That only puts more emphasis on how important Keaton Wagler is for this team this season. So the biggest thing with the offseason the Clippers offseason outside of the Kawhi trade is, of course, picking Keaton Wagler 5th overall. Now, of course, we all expect him to come off the bench, right? We have that starting lineup of, Brook Lopez, Rui Hachimura, Brandon Ingram, or Kawhi Leonard. And then you would think one of Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, and Darius Garland projected to start. Everybody else, including Keaton Wagler, coming off the bench. But now, if you remove that small forward position, maybe you start Chris Dunn and Derrick Jones Jr. Maybe you start Keaton Wagler with Darius Garland, and then you start Derrick Jones Jr. or Chris Dunn instead of Kawhi or Ingram. So, point being that the longer this goes on, the more attention to Keaton Wagler, because where else are you going to put your attention? You know what I'm saying? He might have a bigger role than anticipated. He might, and because it also prevents us from making a move with Mathurin, if you take Mathurin and one of those two guys, either Ingram or Kawhi, are going to be a focal point of this team, out of the equation, then just by process of elimination, Keaton Wagler is going to get more reps and more chances to do things and be a bigger part of this team. So I'm not saying Keaton Wagler should be hoping that this investigation drags on because it's not good for the team that he plays for. But the silver lining, if I were to think of any, would be that Keaton Wagler now has a chance to become an even bigger emphasis, an even bigger focus of this Clippers coaching staff in training camp. And he might be tasked with, God knows if this carries on and there's a court case about it and it's not settled, as I said, it hurts us with Mathurin. And that then gives Wagler an even bigger leash, because if Mathurin doesn't play, then really you're looking at Keaton Wagler to run that second unit alongside Jordan Miller. So that would then give him a much bigger role. So again, that's kind of the thought that came into my head. I also think another angle that we're not looking at, it's not as big of an angle because Kawhi Leonard hasn't done major postseason damage in a while, but there is a level of, for teams that are playing against the Raptors or teams that are playing against the Clippers, if this trade does not get finalized, You're playing against the team that has two teams, the teams that play against the Raptors and the Clippers, that have a giant hole in their roster that's supposed to be filled by a 20 plus point per game scorer on either side. And so the teams that are playing them until this deal gets finalized, until the investigation gets finalized, are getting, I don't want to say a free win, but an advantageous game for sure in every sense. So that is something that I was thinking about as well. Teams that are playing the Toronto Raptors don't have to necessarily worry about Kawhi Leonard. Like maybe after this gets finalized and Kawhi ends up playing for the Raptors in the second half of the season, then those teams that play the Raptors played a very different Raptors team. So just things to consider overall. But, when it comes to Keaton Wagler, you'll probably end up seeing him get more minutes if this happens, more on ball reps, all that stuff. And again, it is not good for the Clippers team. It's not good for the Clippers organization. It simply could just be a bigger role for a Keaton Wagler or a Jordan Miller. Definitely for Darius Garland, but I don't know if Darius Garland wants that. I think he would prefer to have a guy next to him that can get buckets and take some pressure off of him. Otherwise, it's going to be DG. Um, it's I assume it's going to be DG carrying so much of the offensive load. So, but anyway, yeah, that's kind of what I think. If this drags on, I mean, I'm just trying to find silver linings because it's just day after day keeps going by and we just don't know when this is going to end. It's funny because last year when this all came about, I was in Massachusetts visiting my friends, and I think that was late August. I want to say late August. The Premier League had just started, the European soccer season had just started. So yeah, late August, and I was talking about all this stuff, and now I'm going back to visit them on Friday, and we're a year later. And I remember I did a podcast in my friend's room, and his bed wasn't made, and everybody on YouTube commented like, "Dude, could you at least make your bed?" It's like, dude, it's not even my room. But it was funny because it was such a viewed episode. Like it was one of my most viewed podcasts ever, talking about this in my friend's bedroom in Boston. And so now I'm going back to visit my friends a year later because I try to see them every year. And we're still talking about this. It's absurd. It's truly absurd. So again, I think Keaton Wagler gets even more of a push here if the trade doesn't get finalized, but by no means is it a good outcome for the Clippers. But I just keep talking about, oh, it's not a good outcome. What if the trade actually collapses? Do we have a plan B? What's going to happen? I haven't even talked about that, but guess what? I'm going to talk about it coming up. I got to tell you a little something about Indeed. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed sponsored jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed sponsored jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. And with different organizations, something like, I'll give an example. The Dodgers, right? Everybody always talks about, oh, look, we just got Scuba. We just get everybody because we have more money. But we really just wait for the incompetence from other GMs around Major League Baseball and take advantage of that. And that's part of why we've built up this dynasty. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, Clipper Nation, talking about Keaton Wagler potentially benefiting from the investigation being dragged out because his role would then increase and more emphasis would be then put on his development as opposed to integrating Grady Dick and Brandon Ingram into the organization. I mean, and again, I've said it a ton already in this show, but it wouldn't be good for the Clippers. We need the financial clarity. We need the roster clarity. We need to be able to move on from this and just get this off our back. Whatever penalties that are coming our way or coming Bombers' way, we need to face them and move forward. Now, that brings us to the Kawhi trade. What if it falls through, right? I guess let's go through all the scenarios, right? Let's go through all of them. First, this just drags out into the season. I already mentioned what could happen. So then we're looking at a starting lineup of Darius Garland, Chris Dunn, Keaton Wagler, Rui Hachimura, and Brook Lopez. That is not a play-in team, ladies and gentlemen. That is not. So that would be a terrible circumstance, even if it takes 20 games for this to be resolved. Then you have to integrate Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick in the middle of the season. You don't get a training camp with them. That would be awful. And as the one silver lining is Keaton Wagler is going to get a lot of reps. He's going to get a lot of chances to make mistakes. Great. The only problem is we don't own our own pick in 2027. That's a problem. We're swapping with the Thunder, who are going to be one of the best teams in the league again. So that's a horrible outcome. Now, there's the other outcome, which is, okay, this goes on for a couple more weeks. It gets resolved before the season. It all works out. Then it just depends on what the penalties are. Because, yeah, we end up getting Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick. It ends up going through. We get to at least have our team. That would be nice. But what are the penalties and how much are they going to affect our season? You know, this is year 3 of the Intuit Dome. So we'll see how that goes, right? Year 1 was fantastic. Made it to the playoffs. Obviously lost in the first round to Denver. We're the 5 seed. Second year, topsy-turvy roller coaster of a season, but did make history. First team to go from 15 games under 500 to being over 500 at season's end. Losing the play-in game to the Golden State Warriors, though, as the 9th seed. Very unfortunate ending, and especially those games against Portland that, you know, could have put us in a better position to make the playoffs. But that being said, we were going home to the Spurs or the Thunder no matter what. So then there's the other option. What if the trade falls through? What if the penalties are so drastic that would be coming towards Toronto or Kawhi? Like, let's say Kawhi gets this. See, that's the thing, right? What would those even look like? If somehow his contract gets voided, he becomes an unrestricted free agent, which then makes it tougher for him. Like, if he wants the money that his camp reportedly wants, which is around $50 to $60 million per year, the Raptors, I don't think, have the cap space to then pay him that. Now, his list of teams he could go to changes drastically, and they might not want him. The thing about the Raptors is they're trading Brandon Ingram for matching salary. So if his contract gets voided, that's a horrible outcome for him, I think, because it's like he might have to take a smaller deal at that point. If it doesn't get voided and it's just that there's, let's say he gets suspended for 50 games. Would the Raptors still go through with this? I think they honestly would. I honestly think they would. Because the way they're going to see it is we're still going to get him for the following season. He's going to be resting for 50 games, so he's going to be fresh. If we just stay within play-in territory by the time he comes back and then we ramp him up, we might be able to get a 7th or 8th seed, and then no one's going to want to see us in the first round. That could be something that happens kind of similar to what we went through in 2024-25, except he wouldn't be rehabbing. He would just be fine. So I think they'd still go through with it, honestly. Now, if he's suspended for an entire season, then maybe they won't. But I just don't see that happening. I don't. Now, let's say he gets suspended for 20 games. It'll go through. It'll go through. They're going to still want him. But let's just say in the off chance that the penalties are drastic and that the Raptors don't want to go through with this deal and we're stuck with Kawhi. I don't think Kawhi is going to want to come back. I don't think he feels betrayed by the Clippers organization, but it's just business. We weren't willing to pay him. I think the Clippers would be willing to pay him the last year of this expiring deal. But what Kawhi and his camp are looking for is that guaranteed money at the end of the day. They want that guaranteed money. So just one more year with an expiring contract. I mean, yes, it's 50 million, but I don't know if that's what they're focused on. Right. But now I have no proof. Maybe they do say, you know what, we'll play it out with the Clippers. We'll go into free agency in the summer and we'll go from there, which honestly wouldn't be the end of the world because then we would get to play with Kawhi Leonard for one more season. It would kind of be a farewell for him, and we would have a better chance of at least making the play-in and finishing higher in the standings than we would with Ingram because Kawhi is just that much better than him. But again, I've made my point, my stance very clear, and not even a stance, just a prediction very clear. I don't think Kawhi Leonard is suiting up in Clipper colors ever again. I don't think that, at least not in a game. Maybe after his retirement, he comes back and visits and stuff, but I doubt it. Kawhi's not even that type of guy to come visit after his retirement. But I just believe that he has worn a Clipper jersey in a game for the last time. And the trade falling through would be a terrible outcome, in my opinion. Because, what would the front office do at that point? Look for another trade partner? Who would want him? Because if the Raptors say no, I would think it's because the penalties are coming their way harshly. So I have no idea. It would really be bad for the organization if this fell through. Because also beyond that, forget about Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick. We got some draft capital out of this that I was really excited for. That was the big win in the trade, is that we were getting draft capital for this. So we need this trade to go through, Clipper Nation. We need it to go through. This draft capital is exactly what we need to help kickstart the next era, combined with the 2029 first-round pick that we got from Indiana that gives us an opportunity to build for the future yet again. Because, man, it's been looking bleak with this damn Paul George trade and what it's done to us. And so the fact that we can get some replenished draft assets, that is absolutely massive. So, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it overall. We need this trade to go through. It would be an awful, awful situation if it falls through. And this, again, I just don't think Kawhi is coming back at the end of the day. I just don't think he's coming back. But coming up, going to talk about a more lighthearted topic. I asked Tomer Azarli this. What is our big man pecking order? Because we got a couple in the works, young core. Let's talk about that coming up. All right, Clipper Nation. Talked about how Keaton Wagler could benefit if the aspiration investigation continues to lag, but why it's not good for the organization, why the Clippers need this trade to go through. But right now, let's talk about something on the more positive side, and that is our big man rotation. Let's talk about this. So we got a couple of guys, right, that are on our payroll. And we've got Bubba Miller. We've got John I. Broom, Yanic Konan-Niederhauser, and Isaiah Jackson and Brook Lopez, right? So that's a lot of guys. Let's start with who is the first one. Right? The first guy that we need to talk about, and that is Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez is our starting center. He's making $9 million a year this year, and this probably, I would guess, would be the last year of his career. I think Brook Lopez is awesome. He seems like a great guy. He's had an incredible, what will be a 19-year career. Made the All-Star team only once, but I think that kind of sells his career short. He was one of the best centers in the league for many years. He averaged 20-plus points a game 4 different times, all with Brooklyn, or New Jersey/Brooklyn. But I just wasn't really down to have him come back because I felt like it's stunting the growth of our team, and it doesn't really do much for us except for, okay, he's probably a better option to help us win games in the short term, like this season, because he's got that experience and whatnot. However, I just feel like it's stunting. We need to develop for the future, and I personally don't think that after a certain amount of games, that Yanic Konan-Niederhauser would be any worse than Brook Lopez. Like, I don't. I don't feel as though Yanic Konan-Niederhauser would be any worse than Brook Lopez after a certain run of games. But that brings us to why we did this, and that's because Yanic is not going to be ready to start the season. Now, the latest update we have is that he is without a boot. He's walking on 2 feet. We haven't heard anything about him running, though, or him doing full speed anything. So it's safe to say he's not going to be ready to start the season. So I guess we had Brook Lopez for insurance because at the end of the day, we still want to be competitive next year. We can't tank. As I said, we do not own our draft pick. So we still need to be competitive. So Brook Lopez is our starting center. That's without saying. Now, Yanic is making $2 million this year, not fully guaranteed. Actually, no, it is fully guaranteed around $3 million if you round up. $2,880,960. He is the number one choice for the backup when he comes back. There's no debating that, right? But until he comes back, we have a couple of options. We've got Baba Miller. We've got John I. Broom. And we have Isaiah Jackson. My pick is Isaiah Jackson. And by the way, John I. Broom, from what it looks like, he's on a guaranteed deal of $2 million, $150,917. He's in a guaranteed deal. So here's who we have on guaranteed deals. I'm just going to count them for you right now. Kawhi, DG. This is in order of who's getting paid the most. And the gap between Garland and Rui Hachimura in terms of pay, a second and third highest paid players, is ridiculous. $42 million to $14 million. All right, so we got Kawhi. We got Darius Garland, Rui Hachimura, Derek Jones Jr., Keaton Wagler. That's 5. Brook Lopez, Ijax, Chris Dunn, Jordan Miller, Yanic, Kobe Sanders, Cam Christie's not fully guaranteed right now. That's 12, though. John I. Broom, 13. Baba Miller, 14. I guess that last spot is for Mathurin, I would assume, that we're waiting for it. But remember, if the trade goes through, we would then get Grady Dick and Brandon Ingram in replace for Kawhi Leonard. So that would give us 15. So we'd have to do something with someone else, right? Because we have Martinelli, Sean Padula, and Jamarian Sharp on the 2-way contracts. So for me, Isaiah Jackson is the clear-cut backup. He was playing great basketball before he got hurt last year. He was giving us a lot of energy on the glass, finishing around the rim. In 17 games last year, he averaged 7.5 points and 5 rebounds on 76% shooting from the field. He was virtually finishing everything. And it also gives Darius Garland not a great vertical threat, but somebody who's going to screen and roll hard. And he plays with energy and aggression, and I like that. So for me, when you shoot 76% from the field and let me check his per 36. Like, his per 36 was 17 and 10. And his per 36, if you look at his numbers throughout his career, are amazing. So, he's obviously an undersized center, but an undersized center. He did average 1 block a game, though, in his 17 games for us. So even though he's undersized and not going to be able to deter as many shots, he still tries his best. I think there's no doubt he should be the backup going into next season, just because, first of all, the amount that he's getting paid compared to the others and his experience. He's getting paid $7 million. Then I'd say the third choice. Let's say one of Brook Lopez or Ijax gets hurt. It's got to be Baba Miller. He's going to spend some time in the G League. He's obviously still very thin. He could play the 4 or the 5. The 4 is going to really be dependent on how he can shoot from the outside. But I think he can give us a level of ball handling that we don't get with Brook Lopez or Ijax. Gives us a level of Brook Lopez can shoot from outside. Ijax isn't a shooter. Baba Miller, probably in between both, can shoot a little bit, but still hasn't proven to be very efficient. None of these guys are really guys. I mean, occasionally Brook Lopez you can throw it to in the post. Back in the day you could, but now not as much. Baba Miller is somebody who I wish we could have seen a little bit more in the mid post from him in Summer League, but he would be the next choice in my opinion. Before we get to a John I. Broom, he would be the fourth choice. I don't really get having even more big man insurance because we also have Jamarian Sharp on the two-way, so we've got plenty of options now. In that spot with Yanic being out, but overall, Isaiah Jackson's the guy for me. And then Baba Miller. You can follow me on Twitter at DimeDropper_LA. You can also follow me at TikTok and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. My backup Twitter account is DimeDropperPod as well. And then Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell to get us up to 9,000 subscribers before training camp starts. And of course, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to Dime Dropper on YouTube as well for even more LA Clipper, LA sports, and NBA content. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.